I have to have some sort of appropriate relationship with the environment in order for me to be, okay? Now, that leads us to another part, another philosophical abstract thought. How does the environment directly inform our way of being? In other words, how does the clouds, the air, the water, the ocean, how does everything that is in the environment speak to us and inform us as to how we should be, how we should live, how we should drive, what we should drive, what we should eat, how should we think about ourselves in relationship to the environment, okay? Now, for the next 5 minutes or so, I'm going to briefly unpack 4 strands, 4 motifs, 4 ways of seeing this. I'm going to look at it biologically, I'm going to look at it aesthetically, psychologically, as well as spiritually, okay? Next slide. Okay, our dependence on nature, biologically. One doesn't need to spend so much time on this. It's quite obvious, I would say, that we depend on our environment, right? If the water source is bad, we're going to be, again, messed up. We're going to be thrown off. We're going to be affected negatively if the water is bad. If the air quality is insufficient, that will directly affect us. And I have up here a few things. This is not exhaustive, right? This is not the full list, but these are certain things we depend on in the environment. We depend on the earth for the food supply, right? Whether you are a vegetarian or a carnivore, if you eat meat, you depend on how those things are grown, in what context or what soil they're grown in, what's feeding the animals, and so on and so forth, okay? So biologically, we are definitely connected to the environment. We are informed by the environment through the lens of biology, okay? We are deeply dependent on it. Let's continue. Next slide. Aesthetically, what a subjective word, right? Many philosophers, many thinkers have thought about, what is beauty? Is beauty simply a matter of symmetry? Does it deal with proportions and ratios like the Greeks? So the question of beauty, and the beauty being the eye of the beholder, is a serious question, right? And it's a question of speculation. But let's think of it like this, right? I have up here environment as a means of informing us of what beauty is, albeit this is highly subjective. Why do we spend an inordinate amount of time taking pictures of trees and of clouds? And we love to go to the art galleries to gaze at the very thing that is outside of the art gallery, right? Why do artists and poets write about nature and about water and how the feel of water caressing over your skin and the movement of the sand playing with the water and the clouds and the weather and the rocky earth and all these things? Well, all of the environment, all of the earth, if you will, speaks to us in that way. We find high aesthetic value, right, in the earth. In other words, we find it completely beautiful. It captures us, right? And you have many authors, Emerson, Thoreau, these individuals who wrote about it, how this aesthetic quality of the earth drives us and transforms us and informs us and, in a sense, anchors us, that the beauty that is and the sun coming out speaks to me in such a way as to ground me in the here and now, as to really ground me in the environment, okay? 2 more, quite briefly. Yes, next one. Psychologically, I'll go through this briefly. The environment as a means to peace, escape from fabricated realities. Why on earth are we sitting in here listening about the environment while we can simply open up these curtains and go outside? We spend most of our time in fabricated realities. And when I use the word fabricated realities, I mean that we spend most of our time in places we as humans have constructed. Our cars, our jobs, right? The buildings, so on and so forth. And in that, by doing that, it seems to almost, if deep ecology is correct, dehumanize us, right? It makes us less than what we are because we spend so much time indoors. We spend so much time in our cars and we don't walk enough. We don't enter into parks enough. We don't enjoy nature. That has a psychological effect. There's something about being in nature and having that peace, that calm that arises. Okay? And the last one, spirituality. What a provocative word, especially today. We can look at this in two ways. One, depending on your perspective of the universe, depending on how you're looking at things, one can perceive the earth to be a womb, a home, of which you came out of which that sustains you throughout your life, and the very thing that will receive you in the end of your life. That's a very spiritual way of looking at things, right? A Gaia, a Mother Earth, that's one way. And for many cultures and for thousands of years, humans have perceived in some level or another the environment to be spiritually important, that it speaks to us, it directs us, that it informs us. Again, I'm using the word inform. It educates us, it shows us who we are. And also the environment as a pedagogy for life. In other words, have you ever thought about what is the underlying principle of death as opposed to life? It's a very crazy question. But if you think about it, a blade of grass or the first moments of spring that arise, what is the characteristic quality that unites all of life in its apex of life, or when life is really alive? What one might say is that it is mobility, it is flexibility, it is the ability to adapt. And all those things can teach us in a way as to how to live, right? I could learn to be flexible, I could learn to adapt, I could learn how to move with the times, if you will, all right? And in that sense, it's a very spiritual reading, a very spiritual hermeneutic, or reading into, right, an exegetical way of looking into the nature and bringing out of it information that can teach us how to live. And the last slide, if all these things are correct, and I really do believe in some level, at a very real level, that these things are correct, the fact of the matter is that we are embedded in all of the earth. We are so intimately a part of it that to think of the environment and the earth separate from ourselves is to do both the environment and ourselves a disservice. We are so united, we are so connected, that to think of humanity is to think of humanity always in the environment. And thus I wrote here, to be human is to be a species that is intrinsically united to ecological reality. To forget about ecology is to forget about self.
Okay. As you can tell, Joe's morphed into something other than what he just was while he was up here. Okay, we're characters in this skit. You saw the title there in just a minute. I'll get to this quote in just a second here. But Joe is his character is Joe the student. Okay, just to get used to that. All right, and we are the what we call the holistic players. Okay, I'm reduce. Okay. Sandra is reuse, and Kate is recycle. Okay, so we're the 3 R's. All right, and what's happening here is Joe is slipping into a dream. Okay, or maybe even a nightmare. All right, and maybe it's something some of us have dreamed about or had nightmares about. Perhaps not. We'll see what happens at the end of this. Okay, you've done the questionnaire. Okay, if you will, take a minute. Okay. Look at the screen. I hope you can read this. It's a quote that comes from a book called High Tech Trash, Digital Devices, Hidden Toxins, and Human Health. And I think it sets a nice take. I'll give you a minute or so. I hope you can see it back there, just to read that quote. These are garbage people, all right? So we've come into Joe's dream kind of consciousness here, right? And this was an exhibition in Europe, right? Which are sculptures made out of garbage, okay? They're people made out of garbage, and then that's kind of us here, right? And Joe, as you might be able to tell, is he's making garbage, okay? He's just dropping stuff, right?